Well, Simon, thank you so much for joining us on Fully Scored. It's great to speak to you today. You keeping well?
I am, yes. It's a beautiful day here in New York, so yeah, feeling good.
Fantastic. And for those that don't know you, you are the Assistant Territorial Music Secretary over in the USA East Territory. How are things going in that sphere?
Yeah, really well. It's always a busy time over here. Part of my responsibility is also being a member of the New York Staff Band. I've been in the band for this is my 20th full season. So that keeps you busy all the time, but on top of everything else in the role, it's a busy department. Derek keeps us working hard, so there's always a lot of good stuff going on. So yeah, good times.
Excellent. That's really wonderful to hear. So we're going to be speaking about Eric Ball's meditation Serenity today. Is this a piece that you are fond of?
Yeah, there's a bit of history here. I wouldn't say I was really familiar with it until just a few years back. I've grown up in some big core. I grew up at Derby Central with a great core band there. When my family moved to the States, we soldiered in Flint Citadel in Michigan, which also had a great core band. And I don't remember hearing this piece as a young guy back in the UK, but that could have just been I wasn't really just aware of all the army repertoire back then. But I honestly do not remember playing this piece in my core band in Flint. And it wasn't until I moved out to the East and played it in the New York Staff Band under Ron Wakes Norris a couple of times that I became a little bit more familiar with it. And I'm a big Eric Ball fan. I don't think there's a piece that he's ever mailed in, as we say. I think everything he's written is fantastic, and there's just so much thought behind, so much passion behind all of his music. So it did speak to me, but it wasn't until a year or so ago where the piece really jumped out to me. And the reason for that was just a couple of days before playing this at Montclair Core Band rehearsal, my wife and I had been doing some devotions together, and we had read the story of Horatio Spafford, who wrote the words to It Is Well With My Soul. And it's a devastating story, but there's also a lot of hope in the story of how this came to be. And so just reading about this guy's life and what he had gone through, losing his family, which I'll explain a little bit in a minute. It really spoke to me, just how this song came to be. And then a couple of days later, it was not coincidence, I don't think. We actually played this in the core band. And I really had this real epiphany moment, this light bulb moment, when playing the piece, just to some of the devices that Eric had included in the score. And I don't know, and this is all speculation, I don't know if this is intentional, if this was intentional on Eric's part, but I did explain some of my thoughts and findings to a couple of people that I trust and respect, and they said they hadn't heard this, but they could definitely understand or could definitely see it and appreciate how this could be true. So let me just maybe explain a little bit about the story of how the lyrics came to be. So Horatio Spafford was a successful businessman from Chicago, Illinois. He made his fortune in real estate, and there was the Great Fire of Chicago in 1871. He lost a lot of his real estate. All his buildings burned down, and his family was finding themselves struggling financially. So this was kind of the first moment of turmoil in his life. And there were some other issues going on with the family, and one of the issues was with one of his daughters. He was married and had four daughters. One of the daughters took ill and thought that they would be able to maybe make a trip over to the UK, over to England, where they would meet with Moody. I forgot the first name. He was an evangelist. And this guy was going to be in the UK preaching and evangelizing, and they thought, hey, maybe we can join this guy over there. We can seek prayer for our daughter who's struggling with some illness. And so decided to make this trip over. Well, a couple of days before they were set to set sail over to the UK from New York, Horatio had some other business dealings that came up, so he needed to hang back for a couple of days. So his wife and daughters went on ahead of him and got on their ship to travel across the Atlantic. So a couple of days into this trip, I think it was about a week or so into this trip, which for me sounds fantastic. I know you guys know how this goes in London, taking the underground, here in New York, taking the subway. It would be really nice just to get on a ship and travel somewhere and take our time, right? Just sit back, no rush. But about a week into the voyage, their ship was struck by another ship. And unfortunately, it did sink, and the 4 daughters were lost. Horatio's wife did survive, and once she got onto another ship, she was able to send a telegram to Horatio, and I believe that the telegram said, "No one saved, what do I do?" And so she's basically now on her way to England without her husband. She's just lost her daughters in this trip. So a short while after that, Horatio is now also making the crossing over to the UK now to rejoin with his wife. And as they get to the point where they believe the previous ship went down, the captain brought him up and said, "We think this is where your daughters probably perished, and we believe this is where the ship went down." And it was in that moment that he'd had an idea of penning the words to it as well, but it was in that final moment there where he really finished the words to this song. And at that time, I think he just wrote the 2 verses. I think altogether now there might be 6 verses have been added over the years. When Eric wrote this piece, he refers at one point to the 4th verse, but I find the lyrics are in the 5th verse. So, there's a little bit of discrepancy in the verses there. But just very powerful music. So, what happened when I played this piece in the core band? After learning this story, and I was aware of it a little bit, but maybe not all the finer details of the story. I'm a lover of the ocean. I love anything nautical. I just love to be by the coast, by the sea. It's something that just speaks to my heart. And I found after knowing this story and then playing this piece again, just some themes that for me have a bit of a nautical feel to them. Kind of this flowing, this ebb and flow of water and waves rising and falling again. And there's a couple of things that as we go through the piece, I'll point out. But really, this is what spoke to me when I heard it. And there was a moment that we'll get to in the piece that really, really just struck me. And again, not sure if this is intentional on Eric's part, but certainly for me, it spoke to me. So I think we'll start right at the beginning. And if we look at just the first few bars, the first 8 bars or so, this is sort of the introduction of the piece, and right away we have this moment of serenity. Right, I feel like this is the moment where you're on the deck of the ship and it's a beautiful sunny day, and the sea's just kind of flowing gently, and there's just a gentle lull of the waves. And I think this is reflected just in the first couple of bars. We just see this a whole step movement up in the music, and then it just falls back down again. It's very relaxed. It's a real scene of serenity. Eric has definitely set it up that way. This is a serene moment right off the bat. About 5 bars in, the mood changes a little bit. There's something else going on here. And then we get to section A. For me, this is kind of an extension of the introduction here. But I think it's important because he introduces another device here, starting right at the 2nd bar of letter A. And this is there's 2 devices really that I see throughout the music. It's this rising and falling thing that's going on. But then it's also the use of chromatics. And to me, the chromatics is really the thing that sticks out and is really the important thing. So, knowing this piece was written in the 60s, thinking of the time, this was a bit of a style, I think, using chromatics in music. In Flint Citadel back in the day, we had a chord pianist who every offertory that she would play on Sunday morning would always end with this little da-da-da, this really cheesy chromatic thing. And it was kind of it became a joke in the bass section of the chord band. We would always be ready for it to happen. And once she did it, we all kind of did jazz hands. We did kind of make fun of her a little bit for it. But I think she was just a product of the time that she grew up, and this was a style of music, or just something that was happening in music at that time. So, we could say, well, this was the 60s, and maybe Eric's influenced by some other things here. I think there's more to it than that. I think this chromatic represents something else. So we do see that starting in the second bar of A. We start to see some of these chromatics. As we go on a couple more bars after that, this is a very silly side note here, but we're going with the nautical theme. So if we look in bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of letter A, we see the basses with this minor second thing that's going on. I'm wondering if John Williams was inspired by Eric Ball, because we've got the Jaws theme. It's very silly, I know. Anyway, a silly side note there. But it does evoke this, something's happening. There's some turmoil under the water here, right? And I guess that's why John Williams used it. It worked so well, right? But Eric does that here with the basses. There's something else going on. There's something lurking under the water. Maybe something's coming. Something's happening. If we get to letter B, we have the tune is introduced for the first time with it as well, and it's fairly plain. It's at a pianissimo. Again, the scene is that of Serenity. It's calm. The voyage across the ocean so far is good. Smooth sailing. Everything is good. As you move a little bit further into letter B, though, again, I think it's bar 8, we now see in the bass line and also in the baritones, in the first horn, and then also the second cornet, we see the line rises again a little bit here. And if you think in terms of the music, if you were just playing this at the organ or the piano, you may not necessarily play that bass line ascending there. And he does that a couple of times. Again, I believe this is maybe referencing this rising of a wave or something. The sea's getting a little bit bigger now. Maybe the waves are increasing or something. So there's just a little hint of that rise and fall again. We go through letter C. Not much else happens. We hear it as well. Right there, letter C, and then we move on. We get to letter D, and we've kind of the introduction comes back a little bit, slightly different, a little bit of a different color here, but we're leading into the next section now. If we look 4 bars before F, this is where the mood starts to change just a little bit. And there's a nice little Eric Ballism. I think the bar before F, we hear this in Song of Courage, moving on beat 2, we kind of raise up that minor second again, but we come back down on beat 2 right before bar F. It's an Eric Ball thing that we hear in his music, which is very cool. I love when you can find those little nuggets from piece to piece from the same composer. But the mood has changed a little bit going into F. So back to the story. This Atlantic crossing is happening with Horatio's wife and his daughters. The ship has been struck, and it doesn't immediately sink. The boat doesn't immediately go down. But there's a moment where I think everyone knows, we're not going to make it. The ship is going down, and we're not sure what's going to happen. And so Horatio's wife tells a story. In those moments, she knelt down on the deck of the boat with her 4 girls, and they prayed for 2 things. One, either that they would be saved from this and they wouldn't drown, they wouldn't go down with the ship, or that if this is going to happen, that they would not fear death. They would not be afraid of what is coming next. And I think at letter F, for me, again, knowing this story, playing the music, this is the moment for me where there is this moment of serenity again. The dynamic comes back down to a pianissimo here. The ship has already been struck. There's carnage. It's a mess. But now it's just kind of floating, waiting to go down. And she has a few moments left with her daughter, and to have this time of prayer and figure out what's going to happen next. Now this chromatic thing is reintroduced in the euphonium, and this is so solemn. And it's interesting, if you read the score notes for this piece, Eric, he's not too happy at the fact that this tune has been associated at funerals and solemn events. And if you look in the program notes, he actually says this is ridiculous, and this is really a song of affirmation, and that something better is coming, or there's the promise of the hope of glory, and so he doesn't really like that. But this is really a solemn moment for me, and we see that chromatic line again. I haven't explained yet what I think that chromatic line represents. I'm going to get there in a minute. But we have this moment now where letter F, the mood is certainly a little bit more solemn. And that brings us into letter G. And something, again, is starting to stir here. I think the prayer is concluded, something else is happening. And it's, for me, when I had this real moment with this piece at Montclair, playing this in the core band, it was really those few bars before H. And this is where now the whole band is involved in this chromatic line, and it's a descending chromatic line. And that's really the important part for me. If you're familiar with some films like Titanic, who hasn't seen Titanic? Or The Perfect Storm or anything like that, if you listen to the music that those composers have written, there's this descending chromatic line that really represents kind of a sinking feeling. And again, I feel like Eric was so aware of this story, how this song came to be. I have to believe those few bars before letter H is really now, this ship is going down. That's it. There's no going back now. The whole band is involved with this descending chromatic line, and we're just sinking, 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 sinking. The ship has gone down. Then you get this big bass moment that really finishes us off, and we hit the bottom of the ocean floor, and there we are. But it doesn't last long, because letter H, the trombones enter and take over for us and kind of reverse that line. We're now ascending. There's a different rhythmic device happening here now. There's a more positive feeling. I think this is the moment. They've perished, and they've prayed that they would not fear death. And in this moment, Eric this is where he refers to what he claims is verse 4. What I found, this is actually verse 5. But the words of the chorus there says, "O trump of the angel, O voice of the Lord, blessed hope, blessed rest of my soul." They have that blessed hope, the hope of glory. They've made it, they've reached it, and the blessed rest of my soul. Your soul is finally at rest, and you've entered the kingdom of heaven. And I think this is represented now by these ascending moments here in the trombones, and dynamically we're increasing, and we finally climax the 3 bars per letter I with a fortissimo. It is well with my soul. And I think that's the triumphant moment right there. When I play this piece now, this is all that I can think of, is this story behind this. And I do wonder, did Eric was there any inkling of, this story as he was writing this music? He does state, this is music, this is affirmation of our faith, affirmation of there being a savior and there being something else after this life. And we find that moment right there. And then finally, at letter I, we kind of wrap it up one more time. I think we're safe in the arms of Jesus. It is well with my soul, and we're there singing that with him. Again, back to that pianissimo, that moment of serenity. And finally, we get to the end of the piece, and this is where I come back now to the feeling of being on the ship. There's one little wave, last little wave that happens right there. 2 bars from the end, we just have that a little rise and fall once again. The ocean is calmed once more, and the journey goes on. And so this is how this music has spoken to me in recent years. I could be completely off base with all of this, but this is my story, and this is how it has spoken to me since playing this. So I hope that's useful to you.
Absolutely, and shows the beauty of music, that we can have these interpretations, whether the composer meant it or not. If that means something to you, then that's
Right.
the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that and that story. It's really fascinating to hear a bit of the history behind the words and the melody there, and the way that Eric Balls treated it.
Yeah, and it's incredible. This piece is called Serenity. The circumstances behind all of it, even the hymn tune. Philip Bliss died in a fiery ball of death with his wife in a train accident. You think how the words are written, the melody, the tune was written. You think of the circumstances around what happened to these guys. It's dreadful. It doesn't really portray a scene of serenity, but we see the bigger picture here, right? And what that all means. So, yeah.
And for you personally, do you have a favourite recording or moment when you've performed this piece that really sticks out to you?
Honestly, it was in that rehearsal. Yeah, I think some of the simplest moments. When the Lord can speak to you at any time. It doesn't have to be on the stage. It doesn't have to be in the Army Hall on a Sunday. It was in rehearsal, and perhaps I was primed a little bit. Just knowing the story and having read this in devotions a couple of days before. But gosh, yes, the Lord really just grabbed a hold of me in that rehearsal. And it was great, and I actually got to share this thought a couple of weeks later in devotions. I was on for devotions a couple of weeks later, so it was kind of nice to be able to do that. But yes, certainly that was the moment, right there in rehearsal. There was no one else around, just the band, and it was pretty special. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Simon, thank you so much for sharing your story there and for sharing the music with us and our listeners. It's really been great to speak to you, and I hope that we're able to speak to you again in the future.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much.